Welcome everyone to the 20th anniversary of storytelling, and I particularly like to welcome John and Jerry, who are here for the first time. They've come a long way, so welcome John and Jerry. And also, you might have noticed that there's some people standing around here, so welcome to Glenn, welcome to Murray, welcome to Nigel, who are going to film the evening. How lucky are we? So welcome, guys. Right, I'd just like to begin the evening by just acknowledging the traditional owners, the Turrbal and Jagera people, Aboriginal people who roamed these lands thousands of years ago and told stories. And their stories were part of the song lines. And their stories were of creation, of customs, of traditions. And those stories passed from tribe to tribe across this vast land, creating a sort of a connection. And similarly, ourselves, we've created a place to come, a place to tell, and we've created connections here. And connections that are probably like community and almost akin to family. And I've certainly really appreciated those over the years. So I guess looking back, we first started on the 16th of September 2001 in St Mary's Church House. And Trish and I never really envisaged that we'd still be going 20 years later. And we are, of course. We didn't think beyond that first meeting. I'd just like to acknowledge that there were some people here that were at that first meeting. Trish was there, I was there, and but also Mark and Kathy, and your contributions and creativity over the years have been very much appreciated. And I'm really so grateful that Aaron is along here tonight, because Aaron didn't come at that first meeting because he was just a twinkle in. Maybe more than a twinkle at that stage in Mark and Kathy's eye. And he was actually born the following year, but from a few months old, Aaron would come along, and he grew up as a wonderful storyteller in our group. So welcome, Aaron. It's so wonderful to see you. But look, the presence of all of you, whether you've been here for 150 meetings or one meeting, is valued. And each of you over the years have helped create that beautiful tapestry that was cocktails and is an evening of storytelling. I was discussing the makeup of the fabric of the world with a science teacher once, and he said that the world is made up of atoms, but I reckon it's made up of stories. Stories make the world go round. Stories can inform, they can educate, they can make us laugh and cry. They can inspire us. And over the years, all of us have shared stories and left a little legacy that has grown into a large legacy. In your homes, when you're here, you tell stories. We're all storytellers. We were storytellers. We will be storytellers forever, basically. So welcome again to everyone. It's a privilege to have you all here. And long may the spirit of storytelling be with you, although maybe not too long tonight because we've got a lot of stories to get through. So without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to draw the order of storytelling. We're going to have a shared dinner in a moment. And so they're in a hat here. So my assistant here is going to help me. So what he's going to do is, Jean, you can pull them out. We'll get to you in a minute too, Jean. You can pull them out. And David, so the first storyteller of the night will be... So David, number one. Number two will be, perhaps you don't need to read the title, just the person.
Okay.
Laurel, number 2. Number 3. Jen, number 3. Number 4. Alan. Number 5. Mark. Number 6. Paula. Number 7. Bruce. Now, I just must know, some of you might notice that Bruce isn't here tonight. Our wonderful friend Bruce, who I should also say was at that first meeting. But I should also say that Don Smith was also at our first meeting, and Nola came soon after, and your presence has been very valued too, Nola. But just before we go on, we'd just like to remember very quickly a couple of special people that were special in our midst, and one was Bruce. Bruce's birthday is today, and tomorrow there's a memorial for Bruce down at Currumbin. So Bruce has a story tonight. We're going to read one of his poems. And also Brian. We'd like to remember Brian. Brian was such an amazing character. Brian had such a zest for life that even 2 or 3 or 4 weeks before he passed away, he would still go out to dinner. So he certainly embraced life to the fullest. And he was such a knowledgeable and beautiful soul. Sorry to interrupt. Now, what's the next one?
Peter, number 8.
That's me, number 8.
And Karen, number 9.
Karen, 9.
And Tony, Toni, number 10.
Tony, number 10.
And
Yeah.
Paul, number 11.
Paul, number 11.
And George, number 12. And Kathy, number 13.
Lucky 13.
And Josephine, number 14. And Nola, number 15.
Okay, beautiful. So we've got 15 storytellers. So we'll probably, after dinner, we'll have half of them, and then we'll have dessert, and then we'll have the other half. I'd just like to pass over now to our beautiful friend Jean, who does something special every year to us. She comes to these evenings. Well, apart from coming to these evenings, what do you do?
Well, I make these little chocolate boxes. I make them every year. I make them for my family and sometimes for friends. But when I make the boxes, I think about what the night is. And these ones I've made are from all different pre-loved cards that I've been given and people have gave to me. So I've made them so they're all different sizes, different shapes. But often at Christmas time, when we're doing our Christmas, I make them for Christmas. And when we're doing our Christmas lunch, whoever's doing it, it's always the children that do it. So if it's my daughter, I'll say to her, "Now, what's the theme for Christmas?" And it either has to be silver or gold or whatever she wants. But these ones are just all a mixture like all of us, a mixture of people. So, okay.
Thank you, Jean. That's really beautiful, and welcome to Tony and Rona as well. No worries. No, it's great to see you. I'd just like to mention one little person before we go on. I'd like to thank Trish for like when I first mentioned that we were going to have these nights. She said, "What the?" No, she didn't really. No, she's always been really supportive and decorates everything so beautiful, and she is the hostess with the mostest, and we're lucky to have you. Right, and now also telling the stories, you can either stand or there's a seat here if you want to sit down, but if you can use the microphone, please, that'd be good so that the sound can come out. Even and normal. Okay, let's eat. Thank you. Help yourself inside. Unusual having and our next storyteller, good friend who's been there from almost the beginning and is still here. Please welcome with his story, An Unusual Event in March 2008, David.
Yes, thank you. Peter mentioned that, what did you say about starting your evening back in 2001, 20 years ago? I've been friends with Peter for over 30 years now. I don't think I was at that meeting, but I arrived soon after, and I've been here ever since. As Peter mentioned, my speech is called The Unusual Night of March 2008, and it was, in fact, a storytelling evening when Peter and Trish lived at Mount Gravatt East. And the theme was music. Jean and I arrived quite early that evening at Mount Gravatt East. And as we arrived, I parked under a tree on the other side of the road, and I looked up at the tree and looked down the ground, and there was sap. So I thought, I'm not going to park here, I'll park outside Peter and Trish's place. So I did. I parked outside, and Jean and I sat in the car and talked for a while because we got there a little bit early. And after a few minutes, probably 10, 15 minutes or 10 minutes, we decided to knock on the door and go in. And knocked on the door, and Peter and Trish answered the door and welcomed us. And a short time later, other people arrived for the storytelling, just like this evening. Everyone was seated at the table, ready to have dinner, still talking, and we heard this loud screeching and bang outside. So everyone got up and ran outside, and we saw two young men walking around in circles, holding their heads, yelling, "What have we done? What have we done?" And we found out later that the young fellow that was driving was drunk, and he was driving his father's car. And what he did, he went down the roundabout so quickly that he misjudged the roundabout, and he turned around so quickly and smashed into my car. And in front of my car was a lady called Mary, and she had a brand new little Volkswagen Passat. And my car was pushed 2 metres up onto the gutter, onto the nature strip. Anyway, that's that part. Now I'll just go over. And in fact, thinking back how silly it was, Jean and I were sitting in that very car only 20 or 30 minutes before. So heavens forbid what would have happened. As I found out, our car was a write-off. And the young guy who I was talking to, he was fairly drunk, and he was only about 17 and a half on red P plates. And he said to me he was so scared he wanted to run away. And I said to him, if you run away, I'll run you down and drag you back. So bring it on. I told him I would run him down. And as I said, we all walked outside, and one of our friends, David, who's not here tonight, David walked over to this young fellow and said, "You cannot leave, this is a crime scene." The police were called, and also the young guy said, "I want to go inside to Peter and Trish's house," which he didn't know, to sit down. And we said, "No, you're not going into the house, you're going to sit on the grass and wait." And then he sat on the grass and waited for his mother to come, which his mother was only 500 metres away. And his mother arrived and asked, "How is her little darling going?" And I can assure you that didn't go down well with me. And his mother did not ask how anyone else is going, just wanted to know how her little darling was going. I said to his mother, "Look what your little darling have done. My car is a wreck, that car over there is smashed, and you're only worried about your little darling. The police arrived and breath tested the little darling and took him into the police car, into the police station. And his mother had the hide to ask the police officer, can he hop in the police vehicle with her son to go to the police station? And the police officer was not very impressed with that request and said to her very angrily, you can follow in your car. I got pretty, during that period, you can imagine how angry I was, how everyone was quite anxious over the whole period, and we were outside for probably over an hour trying to sort things out. And I was pretty chatty with the truck driver, the tow truck driver, and the tow truck driver gave me his name and address and the phone number of the little darling. Later in the week, I rang the insurance company and I told them all the details that I had. The insurance officer said to me, the drunk driver will receive a heavy fine for drink driving, lose his licence, and will have to pay for the damages of my car, Mary's car, his father's car, the tow truck, the accident rescue truck. The young drunk driver had to face the music, as the theme was music for that night. Eventually, after probably 1.5, 2 hours, we all went inside Peter and Trish's place and we had dinner as if nothing else happened. And later, Jean and I were driven home because I didn't have a car. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. A very memorable night, and it was only a few meetings after that we had a Indigenous story night, and I got the Aboriginal flag from school, and I pinned it up on the pergola, and I was standing up on the table, pinning it up, and I realised, oh gee, I'm standing on a glass table, so I tried to leap off, and I went through the table, and the glass shattered into a million pieces, and Trish's face when she came round the corner was priceless when I was there in my pants and my socks. And but someone says, look, you can get that back on insurance. So I wrote it on the insurance claim, fell through glass table while putting up Aboriginal flag at storytelling evening. And yes, all the table's in there. We've still got the table, and I'm glad we've got it because my parents gave it to Trish and I for our wedding. So that's very special. Now, our next storyteller is a person that I met about 10 years ago at a funeral home. When I was organising my funeral. No, I wasn't actually, but and I'm glad I've met her because she's an amazing writer, and she always shares some beautiful images with us, and no doubt there'll be the same tonight. Stories that serenade the senses. Please welcome Laurel.
Thank you. I chose this one because this was the theme of the first story night that I came to 10 years ago. So I'm a halfway person in the group. I've been coming for 10 years now. So I know time's short, so I'll get straight into the story. The old house where my mother had grown up is full of ghosts now, haunting the strangers who have moved in. But back in the 60s, it echoed with the voices of lively children. That's me and my cousins. It stands at the end of a narrow lane, a Fibro Queenslander. The last house overlooking the remains of a creek, and in the near distance, Mount Archer crouches, blocking the sea breeze. It was the heat of a Rockhampton summer when there were absent parents and just a frail grandmother in charge. A pack of stray children, made up of sisters, cousins and neighbourhood kids, trailed by a pack of mongrel dogs, fearlessly wandered the neighbourhood from morning till dark, coming inside only to eat our meals. The creek was being resumed. It became a tip of black, rotting rubbish and toxic black smoke. But there were treasures to be found there. A box containing a flamboyant orange hat and little statuettes. Bric-a-brac in perfect condition, found in a dumped box. Fried, soggy red tomatoes to accompany our eggs and bacon for breakfast, cooked on the old wood-fuelled stove, even in the height of summer. The fresh tang of cucumber and onion rings swimming in a sea of sweetened vinegar to accompany our lunchtime salads. Fresh, aromatic mangoes plucked straight from the mango tree in the overgrown garden, the fruit's flesh hot, yellow and sticky as it dribbled down our arms and smeared about our mouths. White curdling junket pudding with syrupy stewed apricots after tea. Nightfall. Before the invention of mesh-screened windows, mosquitoes whined by our ears, and we scratched our itching flesh raw with nothing but spit and pink calamine lotion for protection. Slapping at their black and gorged bodies, our legs and arms would be smeared with our own blood, tormenting us until we crawled under our dusty cotton mosquito nets at bedtime. But first, a creep down the back steps to the dark and shadowy toilet under the house. Fat, large, warty cane toads scattering before the dancing light of torches and our loud stompings. Fat, giant green frogs clustered above our heads in the high cistern, their throats pulsing, terrifying us as we imagined them jumping down on us as we sat on the orange toilet seat. Pull the chain and be surprised as one appeared drenched in the bowl where it had been hiding under the toilet rim. How quickly we'd race back upstairs. Outside the window, scary silhouettes of hordes of flying foxes winged across the evening sky to squabble over the mangoes on the trees. Awaking suddenly in the night as the possums thundered across the tin roof. These are the sights and sounds and colours and tastes and smells of a childhood summer. That's it.
Wow, thank you.
Peter, we've lost the sound.
Lost the sound? Okay. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Laurel, for those beautiful images. Our next storyteller is one who's been here for a few years and was brought, I think, by Josephine and Alan, and she's a great storyteller and has since become she's going to be an amazing filmmaker as well. She's also part of the Brisbane Movie Makers group, and I'm glad we've found this person, so please welcome her with her story, Lost. Oh, it's Jen.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me down the end? So, Josephine, can you remember how many years it's been? Because I can't. Is it 3?
I think it's 3.
3. That sounds right. Well, this is a story from an evening not too long ago, and the theme was It Happens, Shit or Miracles. Not my title, that was the title Peter gave. It's a short story, so it'll be over soon. Thank you for your indulgence. I'll start from the beginning. Have you ever had that sickening feeling in the pit of your stomach the moment you realise your car has been stolen? It happened to me last week. I came back home after a walk, and the space on my driveway, where the car is usually parked, was empty. It's not the first time this has happened to me. The time before this one, many years ago, I'd parked in the Myers Centre underground car park on a stinking hot summer day. I'd made a mental note that I had parked in the orange car park. So when I'd checked each and every bay, nearly passing out from the fumes and the heat, it became obvious that my car had been stolen. The first time I discovered my car had been stolen was when I'd worked until about 3 a.m. at Princess Alexandra Hospital. A security man walked me across the road to the staff car park where my car should have been, and to my horror, all that was there was an empty space. The cogs of my brain were turning very slowly. I was exhausted after a run of late nights, taking blood every 20 minutes from research subjects undergoing 24-hour sampling. As we walked back to the hospital to report my car missing, hazy memories of the previous day came floating in, and I realised I had actually had a lift to work and planned to take a taxi home, as I knew I'd be very tired at the end of my extended shift. I did feel very stupid and embarrassed in front of the security man, but was overwhelmed with gratitude that my car was parked safely at home. As for the Myers Centre orange car incident, my car was genuinely missing, as I'd checked every single bay. I called security so that I could report the theft and liaise with the police for them to get any camera footage available off the security team. It was only as I was preparing to leave that the security guard asked me if I'd checked the other orange level. Other orange level, I asked. Yes, he said. The orange level is a split-level car park with 2 sections. Sure enough, on the other level, there was my car, waiting safe and sound, not stolen at all. That brings me to my latest loss. Yes, the car really was absent from the driveway. I made myself a cup of coffee and lamented that the car was not really worth anything, and even if insurance would pay out, it would not be enough to buy another car. I tried to think of it as a first world problem. How many people would never be able to own a vehicle in third world countries? I tried to be grateful for having legs and a level of fitness that enabled me to walk. I felt gratitude for our decent public transport system and rationalised that walking and using public transport would be better for my health and the environment anyway. Hang on a minute. Walk? My walk up Mount Gravatt this morning, come to think of it, I suddenly remembered the steep track which climbed up the back of Mount Gravatt from the scout den. And in my mind's eye, I saw my battered old car patiently waiting for me at the trailhead. It seemed that my car had not been stolen at all, and that I'd walked a rather long way home via a circular route, completely forgetting that I had driven my car to the start of the walk. Third time lucky. It seemed that I did still have a car. The glee of this discovery was tempered somewhat with the realisation that perhaps what I had truly lost was my mind.
Well, thanks, Jen. That's a beautiful story, and hopefully it leads you to finding those tripods too that you misplaced. That's another story. Our next storyteller is prolific in many ways, but certainly prolific in writing. I'm not sure how many novels he has written, but maybe he could tell us when he comes up. He's a man with a wonderful intellect, love of history, and a radio voice. So please welcome Alan with, his story, Black Humour.
Thanks, Peter. Actually, talking about the radio voice, I've recently volunteered to be an announcer on 4MBS. And I had my baptism of fire yesterday morning at 7:30. Right. The theme for that night when I had this story was colour, being perverse, I chose black. Humour takes many forms. It can be whimsical, satirical, slapstick, wordplay, downright dirty, or you name it. The forms are many. Biting repartee is another form of humour. My favourite historical one is that of John Wilkes, an 18th century radical politician, in the House of Commons when Lord Sandwich interjected during one of Wilkes' speech. "Wilkes, you will either die on the gallows or of the pox." Wilkes shot back, "That must depend on whether I embrace your lordship's principles or your mistress." But the theme of tonight is colour, so I will concentrate on black humour. Though one may say there's no colour in black, and another that there's no humour in black humour. Nevertheless, let's begin with an epitaph for a politician by Hilaire Bollock, which could well apply to any of ours. Here, richly, with a ridiculous display, the politician's corpse was laid away. While those of his acquaintance sneered and slanged, I wept, for I'd longed to see him hanged. Last words are a rich field for black humour. Some examples. Oscar Wilde, aesthete to the end, dying in the dingy Hotel de la Sasse. "This wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. One of us must go." W. Somerset Maugham, dying is a very dull and dreary affair. My advice to you is to have nothing whatever to do with it. Terry Catch, rock musician. Don't worry, it's not loaded. General George Sedgwick, Union General in the American Civil War, standing on the breastwork, scoffing at his men for ducking from the Confederate sharpshooters. "Why are you dodging like this? They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." Three examples of last words when facing the firing squad. Eskin Childers, author of The Riddle of the Sands, executed by his enemies during the Irish Civil War merely for possessing a pistol. "Take a step forward, lads. It'll make it easier." Harry Breaker Morant, condemned for killing non-combatants in the Boer War, according to the British. A scapegoat for Kitchener's war crimes, according to the Australians. "Shoot straight, you bastards. Don't make a mess of it." James Rogers, condemned in Utah for murder when asked if he had a last request. "Yeah, give me a bulletproof vest." Spike Milligan wanted the words, "I told you I was ill," on his tombstone. But the church objected, so they wrote it in Gaelic, which they couldn't understand. Spike's humour was absurdist, and he spawned the British genre, I suppose, of absurdist humour, which reached its culmination in Monty Python. But he was always a bit black, and he had a habit of taking up gruesome subjects and peppering them with much made-up words that sounded vaguely like Old English. One example is his poem, Ye Tortures. According to Spike, it comprised a complete list of tortures approved by the Ministry of Works of 1492 for failure to pay leg tithe or sockage. "Now, the prisoner shall be blund on ye grunions and crowled on ye grots. Ye legs will be twaggerlied and pulled through ye mots. Ye nukies will be fungled and split right down the throats, then laid on ye quattle and hung by ye bowls. Twice thucked on the fnefic, yea, broggled thrice twee. Ye mogs shall be grendled and stretched 6'3". By now, if ye victim shows not ye sorrow, send him home, tell him, come back tomorrow." Haven't finished. The greatest exponent of black humour in the mid-20th century was Tom Lehrer. He mocked various forms of popular songs with his own versions. His target in traditional songs was their occasional meaningless phrases like tra-la-la and hey nonny nonny. Did you know that the proper musical term for these, dating from the 16th century, is a dildo? I don't know how the word became the name for something else. But that's the beautiful English language for you. Always adapting, always surprising.
Thanks, Alan. That was, as usual, awesome. So our next storyteller is the keenly dressed and a beautiful storyteller who's been with us for a long time and hopefully will be around for a lot longer. I can't read the title of your story, Mark, so you might have to announce it. So please welcome Mark Jones.
It was a dark, stormy night, and the rain fell upon the school, and the lighting flickered on and off. No, this is not my story. This is how I met Peter. I went to a Toastmasters club, and Peter was the Vice President of Education. So I've known Peter for quite a while, and I think the same club I saw David there as well. Hence a partnership, and I couldn't refuse going along to storytelling. Although I must say I probably didn't get to the first one. I think I got to the second one. There you go. All right. Thank you. A story. Let it come and let it go. Long ago, there was a village on the River Niger, populated by the Ashanti people. Generally they were happy, but at this time, a pall of gloom hung over them. For near their river, their oxes, their lambs, their cattle, and their children were being taken by a giant python. And they called out loudly to the god of the sky, Naomi, please deliver us from this horrible, horrible death. And Naomi said, I wish I could, but the python is my child as well, and I cannot kill one child to save the others. However, in the next village, there is a boastful young fellow. Well, not that young. And his name is Kwaku Anansi. And he always boasts of being clever. Why don't you ask him? And why don't you tell him? If he solves your issue, then we will, in heaven here, sing his praises. However, if he fails, his fate will not be very kind. So, the villagers went and saw Kwaku Anansi. And there he was with his wife, and he said, oh, yes, everyone knows I am clever, especially myself. Yes, I will do this for you, but on the condition that if the python gets the better of me, then you shall give me a great funeral, and you shall sing the traditional songs for me, and you shall play the traditional music. Now, how big is this snake? Is he as big as my hut? Oh no, he's a bit bigger than that. Is he as big as 2 huts? Oh, he's a bit bigger than that. Is he as big as 6 huts? Yeah, that's about right. Okay, big snake. Clever, clever. what I want you to do is tomorrow morning, first thing, you must bring along powdered yam, lots of it, and calabashes of eggs, lots of them, and of course a big carafe of wine. Yeah, palm wine. This is good. Bring that along to near the riverside where he is known to lay. Next morning, Kwaku Anansi got to the riverside, and what he'd asked for was already there. And then, if anyone was looking, they would have been very puzzled, because he started talking to himself. Oh, he is such a fine serpent. He's large and beautiful. The villagers should revere him, not hate him. Why, you are silly. He is not large and beautiful. He is ugly and scrawny. That is why we hate him. You are very silly. I think if you were generous to him instead of reviling him, he would be more appreciative. You say that we are not generous? We are generous to a fault. And then, of course, there was the serpent who had been listening to all these loud voices, heard thud, 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 as though someone had been bashed off, and run away. And then the serpent came out to see what this was all about. And he saw the skinny man, Kwaku Anansi, sometimes known as the Spider-Man. And Kwaku Anansi saw him, and he saw he was everything as big and as described. And he kind of almost, yes, we won't go into what he felt at that stage. But, of course, he was calm on the outside. Oh, you are everything as big and beautiful as they described. Oh, welcome along, your greatness, your beautifulness. The large python, of course, was much abashed by the flattery, and Kwaku Anansi said, "Look, I have brought out some food for you, some lovely yam and eggs." And the serpent went and ate those. And let me wash it down with some beautiful palm wine. And yes, he got the large carafe and chugged it down the snake's gigantic head. After a little while, the serpent, he was sleepy from the food and the drink that he'd had. And of course he'd been quite hungry beforehand, and now he was quite satisfied. And Kwaku Anansi said, I have a slight favour to ask for you. That other fellow said that you were small and scrawny, and you are obviously not. You are large and beautiful. Let me measure you. And the serpent, of course, was, oh, yeah, go for it. Oh, please, you know. And so Kwaku Anansi brought out a large trunk that he prepared earlier. And he said, oh, no, to measure you, you need to lie right next to the trunk here. But of course he was still a bit coiled up. He said, oh, no, we've got to straighten you out Ashanti style. So he had some vines he prepared earlier. So he sort of said, oh, well, I'm just straightening you out. And he tied the end of his tail. And about every 2 metres he tied him up so that he was straightened. And he was able to, and as he was doing that, he was measuring. Oh, yes, you're another yard or two. Yes, it's 21 yards, 31 yards. Brilliant. And of course, he finally tied him completely up. And Kwaku Anansi looked at his handiwork. And the serpent said, are you quite finished? You must have got the measure of me by now. Kwaku Anansi says, yes, I have very much got the measure of you. Come on, people, come on, villagers, come and see. And all the villagers came out to see the cleverness of Kwaku Anansi, who had tied up the serpent. And then Kwaku Anansi got out his axe and chopped off the tail of the great serpent. That is for the goat you ate. Chopped off the next meter. That is for the ox you ate. He chopped off the next meter. That is for the lamb you ate. The next meter, that is for the child you took. And chopped. And finally, he chopped off the ugly big head of the serpent. After the villagers had rewarded Kwaku Anansi for his cleverness, Kwaku Anansi, the Spider-Man, spun his web and got to the heights of where Naomi and the Sky Warriors sat. And Naomi said, welcome! I always thought you were a bit boastful, but it does seem you are as clever as you said that you were. All right, from this moment on, all the tales that you tell shall be known as spider stories or Anansim. But just in case you do not have enough stories, here I have a bowl full of them. And he gave the bowl to Kwaku Anansi. Let it be recognized that Kwaku Anansi is the greatest storyteller and clever man of all time. And Kwaku Anansi took those stories, and as he scaled down his web back to the earth, he let them go. And that's why you have the stories tonight and across the world. Kwaku Anansi and the python. A story. Let it come and let it go.
Well, thank you. Thank you. What a beautiful story, and bringing Kwaku Anansi to us tonight in the guise of Mr. Jones. You certainly made your mark. Okay, now our next storyteller is a well-travelled person, and she has performed in every nation of the world, and she's performing in China tonight. So please welcome Paula with her Chinese opera.
Well, I first came to know Peter through 612 4QR. He was on the radio being interviewed, and that's how I came across. And they said, just ring if you're interested in going along to the group, which I rang, and Peter said, yeah, come. And that's it. So I've been coming for about 7, 8 years.
Did you want the mic at all?
No, I can't use the mic.
Sure.
Okay, so this is really improvised. I'm doing it because I think going back to old, what we did once in the past, I did this story. It's a different story, but I did this Chinese opera thing a few years ago, and yeah, I just thought I'd revisit it. And I'm into a bit of stupidity and silliness and comedy, so I thought I'll just see. I don't even know where this is going, but here goes. Okay. I've got a lot of stuff here. Excuse me. I am the Yangtze River.
sad that is the way. In 2020, 35.32 billion tons of waterways flowed through me, flowed through me. And I have industrial waste flowing through me. And I have agricultural waste flowing through me. Can't you see? See? I am so unhappy. And the emperor, many thousand years ago, traveled on me. And he would be so upset if he saw me now. But I hope you will save me and clean me and stop polluting me. Well, I didn't know where that was going. Thank you.
It flowed like the river. Thank you, Paula. You always make us laugh. Now, our next storyteller is going to do a couple of things. Now, as I mentioned before, our good friend Bruce was here for many years and passed away probably about 18 months ago now, and from stomach cancer. And so Tony is going to share one of his poems, and we're privileged to have Tony here, of course, and she's also going to share some things herself. So welcome, Tony.
That was a hard act to follow, Paula. Having been up the Yangtze, I concur that there's a need to save it, so well done you. First and foremost, I would like to thank Peter and Trish for being my friends. I've known you since before this all started and met you through St Mary's many, many moons ago. And it was actually through Bruce who introduced me to many of the people who are here tonight. And as a result, I've made lifelong friends, and I really treasure knowing you both. You brought a lot of beauty to my life and to my husband's life. You have accepted Dushan, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, but embraced him as part of the family. And when you started your cocktail evenings, I tried to go. It wasn't an easy logistic for me at the time, but I have popped in and out over the last 20 years and brought my husband along, and we've had a ball trying to navigate the various interesting themes that people have conceived, and even had the honour of hosting it at our home. I remember one evening we had a black and white theme, and on that evening I actually became very good friends with Gail Liebman, who was attending along with Paula for some time, who's now moved to the Sunshine Coast, and she misses not being able to be here this evening. I discovered from the black and white theme that Gail had a daughter who was Afro-American and of a different persuasion, and this truth-telling in the stories that we share opened up the doors for her and I to really get to know each other. And this has happened to me countless times with people who've attended your storytelling. It's been a beautiful community that you've built, and it's spoken to me in ways that you'll never know, and given me a voice at times when I felt I had a voice nowhere else. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for the 20 years of service you've done to all of us here. Would you give them a round of applause, please? And Peter even married me. Dushan was a bit jealous at the time. Sorry, Trish. Now on to Bruce. As Peter said, he's been a very dear friend. When he passed away, it was devastating for me. because he and I texted or phoned nearly every single day for the last 10 years, as he did with many of his close friends. And I shared many intimate moments with him that I don't really want to talk about with anyone else but Bruce. But we grew quite close, and he loved coming to storytelling. And I remember bringing him along one evening when he really wasn't well, but he desperately wanted to be here because he knew it would lift up his spirits. It gave him a reason to wake up in the morning and to tap into his creative spirit. At his darkest hours, this was his lifesaver. And I want to thank you both for giving me the opportunity and the honour of reading his poem called Redemption. I hope I do it justice. For months you have laid in your sweaty bed. Neither the kaleidoscope of a rainbow nor the beauty of the sun's rise and fall has had the power to enthrall. Numbly you emerge from this black hole. Early morning slumber has charmed and vivid dreams. Like gentle rain, optimism's tender shoots quenched your parched soul and slowly is magically redeemed. Surly bond of melancholy are unravelled. The grim reaper is banished by the muse. Playfulness unshackled the soul, such a precious gift to lose. Like being caught in a gentle sun shower, like an adrenaline rush before a curtain call, like a medieval night free of leaden limbs, the high of the runner crashing through the wall. Like the condemned man granted a reprieve, time is precious. Colours are vibrant and deep, the sounds of nature mysterious and mellow. Deep, deep slumber replaces fitful sleep. Escaping the lashes of torturous self-rebuke, love, like the current of a warm tropical sea, gently sweeps you up in its silky caress. And from a sterile winter, you are set free. Solitude is now no longer a dreaded enemy, but welcomed as a time of tranquility, time to explore your consciousness, time to recreate a new reality. The brain is like a mighty cataract, it seems, cascading thoughts, some toxic, some petty, and some great. In our lives, we sow and reap the thoughts and feelings we cultivate. Rest in peace, my darling Bruce.
Wow, it's hard to follow that too. And I think I'm next. No, that was beautiful, and it's lovely to remember Bruce. And I guess the story I'm going to tell may help remember him too. I first met Bruce at St Peter's Lutheran College, where I taught for many years. Now, I'm thinking which story I was going to tell tonight. Like I did suggest, tell your favourite story. But I really haven't got a favourite story because it's like choosing between your children, isn't it? I've probably written over 100 stories over the years. So I thought I'd tell the first one that I told that very first night. And it's called The Day the Desks Attacked. It was just an ordinary Monday. The alarm went off at 6:30 and then I went back to sleep, and then half an hour later my mum comes in berating me to get me big posterior out of bed because we're like going in 20 minutes. I hate Mondays. The only thing worse than Mondays is like Tuesdays after a long weekend. Anyway, I got dressed, gobbled down 6 Weet-Bix and made it to the garage before Mum had a spazzo attack. And then, like 20 minutes later, we're at St Petrowski's Lethargy College, the third best school in Australia, they reckon. They must have taken the survey when there was only like 3 schools in Australia. I hate St Petrowski's. The only time I like St Petrowski's is like in holidays, or on the weekends it's all right too. Anyway, the mum just dropped me off, and the first person I saw when I walked through the gate was Hilary Jacobson. Hilary created a new meaning for the word obnoxious. I used to call her the linguistic chicken because her language was so foul. I was trying to avoid her, and she calls out to me, she says, "Hey, dickhead, emu legs." Oh, geez, I can't help it if I got my dad's legs. I wish I'd have come back like my friend Stephanie Atkinson. Stephanie's words really burn, just like the hydrochloric acid that went on my arm in the chemistry one day when Jimmy Jiu-Jitsu was practising his karate. Anyway, it wasn't really an ordinary Monday. Things started to go wrong, like in our first lesson, like Mr. Ryder's English class. When the desks, they started behaving badly. Now, you might say, what have I had for breakfast? But I told you what I had for breakfast, like 6 Weet-Bix or whatever. Anyway, Hilary Jacobson, she throws the chair down and she kicks the desk. And Mr. Ryder, like he gives a big lecture, he says, "You've got to respect the furniture." He says, "Hilary, how would you like it if the desk or the chairs did that to you?" And Hilary doesn't like lectures, so she says, "Oh, Mr. Ryder, you know, desks are just inanimate objects. They don't feel anything." Anyway, we were continuing doing our daily bash when suddenly Hilary's desk starts moving down to the front of the room. And Hilary's jaw dropped. It wasn't a pretty sight. And suddenly the desk starts moving back towards Hilary and gaining momentum, and then knocks Hilary off her chair. And then all the desks run out of the room. We were agog. We were lots of gogs, actually. And soon Mr. Ryder, he regained composure, and he said to me, he said, "Hey, you." He doesn't know my name yet. He said, "Hey, you, go and tell Mr. in charge of school what's happened." Well, what was I going to say? Mr. in charge of school, the desks from Mr. Ryder's class have all ran away, which is exactly what I said. And he said, "Oh, look, I think you better go and see the Occupational Health and Safety Officer, Mr. What's Trouble." "What's trouble?" says old What's Trouble. I said, "The desks from Mr. Ryder's class, they've all run away." He says, "I think you better go and see the counsellor, like Mrs. Empathy." I don't think anyone believes me, but I know Mrs. Empathy. Well, she's a nice, kind lady. So I goes to Mrs. Empathy and I says, "Mrs. Empathy, the desks from Mr. Ryder's class have all run away." And she said, "And how do you feel?" And I said, "Tired." And she said, "How long have you been feeling tired?" I said, "Ever since everyone's asked me to run around the school talking about the desks who's run away." And then suddenly, outside, we could see desks running everywhere. And Mrs. Empathy, she was up like a shot and she bolted. She can spot a crisis 100 kilometres away, the old Mrs. Empathy. Anyway, I thought I better go back to my class. So I went back to my class and they're all standing there on the veranda outside the classroom, and there's destruction and chaos everywhere. There's desks climbing trees, there's desks playing handball, there's desks sliding down the gymnasium roof. And then all of a sudden, the bell goes for chapel. And Mr. Ryder says, "Children," he says, don't go anywhere, just stay here. But an amazing thing happened. All the desks, they moved over to the chapel and lined up outside, just like we do. And Mr. Ryder says, "Hey, you." He still doesn't know my name. He says, "Hey, you." He says, "Go to the chapel and tell Pastor Purgatory that there's desks outside the chapel." So I raced over to the chapel, but before I got there, all the desks went inside the chapel. And when I went inside, like they were all in the pew thingies and downstairs and upstairs, and Pastor Purgatory was like talking. And I thought, oh no, Pastor Purgatory hasn't got his glasses on. I'm going to have to tell him what's happened. So anyway, I goes down the side of the sacristy and I calls out, I says, "Pastor Purgatory, there's desks in the chapel." And he says, "Don't you mean pews?" And anyway, just at that moment, like Hilary Jacobson starts walking down the front of the chapel and she says to Pastor Purgatory, she says, "Pastor Purgatory, can I say a few words?" And he says, "You already have." And a bit of a wit, the old Pastor P is. Anyway, he says, go on. And with that, she turned to all the desks in the chapel. And there was a hush. And it looked as though she was like crying. And she said, "Desks, I am sorry that I hurt you. I did not mean to, abuse you. I am so sorry, please forgive me. I need you. Our class needs you. The school needs you." And again, there was a hush. And suddenly, the desks erupted their lids in spontaneous applause. But then they listened quietly while, Pastor Purgatory finished his devotion. And then they all sang, "The Lord is my desktop." And then they returned to the classrooms, but some of the small ones got mixed up with the big ones and ended up in the wrong classrooms. But I went home happy that day because Hilary Jacobson said something kind, and I realised that St. Petrowski's was not such a boring place after all. And Mr. Ryder, he asked me to write a story called "The Day the Desks Attacked," and I've just told it to you. And as our cat Jurasic said, when he backed into Dad's lawnmower, that's the end of the tale. Our next storyteller is a beautiful soul and the most amazing poet. And we are really privileged that she's here tonight. And this person, over the years, I was looking through some photos today over the years, and whenever we have a special night, she's dressed up as a clown. She's dressed up in her sporting gear for the mini Olympics we had, and we've had, over the years, we've also had mock weddings and crashes and whatever, all sorts of things. We had court cases. We've had lots of special nights. But this person always really makes an effort to make it special, and her poetry certainly does. Please welcome Karen. Okay?
No.
It's a long way down there, isn't it?
It is. Okay. Well, hello. I'm so grateful to be here tonight. And when Peter talked earlier about a tribe, the thought went through my mind that I'm so blessed to be part of this tribe, because it's been a long, hard year and it's just clinging to little normal things that has kept me going through it. 10 or 11 years ago, that's how long it is, when I was first joined the wonderful group, we were given our topics in advance. I was driving home from Mark and Kathy's one Friday night and seriously had to pull over to the side of the road as this poem came tumbling out faster than I could get it typed. The world now is just as confusing as it was then. War and pestilence, starvation when there is enough for everybody's need but not for everybody's greed, and disease as bad as any that has been and is still tearing our world apart. The title was Black History. Why Adam ate forbidden fruit is something of a mystery. Original sin began the page of our book about black history. With war, disease and pestilence, we've filled page after page, the best face of humanity replaced by fear and rage. The 7 deadly sins of old point us to our demise. We've added more as hopelessly we ruin precious lives. Most sins are committed to serve a personal vanity. The picture is there for all of us to see, the face of inhumanity. Wrath and sloth and lust and greed, plus gluttony, envy and pride. The sex trade, drugs, corruption and serious genocide. Man's free fall from the state of grace is now well documented. Hell beckons us. Do we have to go, eternally demented? Man's walked the earth for aeons, creating a great divide. The gates of hell start opening till they are gaping wide. Each war is worse than the one before, and never a lesson learned. Evil man doing evil things, whole countries raped and burned. There are people everywhere you look, intent on personal gain. Power and money motivate them to spread hate and inflict pain. What of the 7 heavenly sins? Can we find them once again? Why are we driven to vice and sin like moths unto the flame? Reflect then on humanity as we continue to write pages in this dark book of history of man in all his stages. There were times when good prevailed, or that is how it seemed. Maybe grace will come once more and man will be redeemed.
Well, thanks very much, Karen, for the very poignant poem. Nothing could be worse than life without a verse. And thanks for sharing it. Our next storyteller is a man, and it's obvious by looking at him that he is. He's been coming a few years, and he's also a published author, has written, I'm not sure how many books, maybe he might be able to tell us, but he's the man in a fantastic shirt. So please welcome Paul with a shirt tail.
Good, thank you. Just looking back on our first Storytellers Night, it was somewhere in 2015 when Jen and I turned rappers. We were singing about our welcome release from our drug dealer neighbours, Elbow and Co. I'll pass around the sheet for those that weren't here. Briefly, the poem went bro, elbow, hip-hop, hero, zero. Elbow, hey bro, why you be a hobo? Hobo, hobo, nothing but a hobo. Hip-hop hero, now you're just a zero. Tried to do the hip-hop, now you've gone all flip-flop. I'll pass that around anyway. But tonight, I worked out that this story probably took part roughly when the group kicked off. It's called A Shirt Tail. And so many moons ago, back in those sunny early 2000s days when I worked as an advertising consultant for Quest newspapers in his inner city branch, an incident with a spider occurred. It happened in that busy, big, bright office several stories up near Westfield, Chermside. And office people were some of the many characters that the then bustling newspaper industry attracted. Josephine could attest to some of those characters, having served a little bit of time in the newspapers on the Tweed, I think, wasn't it? Anyway, producing 3 of Quest's 16 titles at this location were at least 30 staff, including journalists, ad reps, bosses and admins. Staff worked in the sort of tightish office space. Many expect will be made redundant by COVID. Here I add the sad footnote that in May last year, all of Quest's weekly print editions were also made redundant, and COVID once again copped the blame. It's been a handy coverall. For reasons you'll later understand, I also add that being the start of the festive season, I was wearing this very same Lehrer shirt, decorated in Mambo's inimitable style. Unfortunately, alas, time has shrunk the shirt somewhat. Ad rep Johnny Wright was a sprightly chap nearing 60 in what was mainly a fairly young office. The adventurous and some must say opinionated little pom could always be heard in various parts of this vast space, stirring up controversy in his nasally voice. On this day, he was back in the advertising section near the tea room, and I happened to walk by as a largish spider ran across the floor near him. "Spider!" he shrieked, jumping at it, but the thing easily dodged him. When I had a go at tromping the thing, it shot onto my shoe and up my trouser leg. "Shit!" I shouted, and started to undo my trouser belt to locate the creature. Then remembered I was surrounded by mainly women in the advertising section. Dashing into the privacy of the tea room, I shut the door, took my trousers off, stamped on the removed trousers before shaking them wildly. No spider. Where had the thing gone? For a couple of minutes, I looked around before deciding the creature had somehow escaped to who knows where, which was when I got the idea for a little joke. What if I didn't come out of the room? What if I actually pretended the thing had bit me and lay as though collapsed on the floor to surprise the gang? So I spread out on the floor, trousers were still off, though placed strategically over my undies. Minutes went by until slowly and then rapidly the door opened as 4 very startled female faces, and that of a certain little pom, appeared through my slit eyes. Sitting up rapidly, I startled them all in a most satisfactory way. After that, for a while, I was known as Spider-Man around the office. Several weeks later, Jen and I had the good fortune to be invited by a mate to celebrate New Year's Eve in his father's apartment block, a prime spot looking directly across to the Sydney Opera House. To mark the festive event, I was wearing this same Lehrer shirt I'd worn on the day of the Quest Spider episode. I was gratified after telling the story of my office misadventure to see John's Japanese wife Fumiko giggling madly at the tale. John exchanged some words with her in Japanese. He laughed and then spoke in English. "Fumiko finds your story very funny, especially because your shirt has Japanese characters, which means spider. You truly are Spider-Man, Paul."
Thank you very much, Paul, for that really engaging story. Okay, next storyteller is a person. It's obvious from seeing them also that he is. And I think he first came about 6 years ago, and we didn't see him for a while. We saw him 3 or 4 months ago, but he's since on the silver screen, starring in a film called Peppered Red, in which he sings. Please welcome, and he can introduce the title of his story because I'm sorry, I can't quite read it. So please welcome George.
Thank you. Yes, before I start this story, I'd like to also remember Bruce. Yes, I did come here about 7 years ago before I had some medical issues. And I remember meeting Bruce, and he was a lovely, lovely human being. Very sorry to see that he's gone. The title of this little short story is He Wasn't Right in the Mind. I was 12 years old when I first noticed that he wasn't right in the mind. I didn't know if he was born with the condition or if some incident in later life caused the brain damage. We didn't see him that often, but my family let him hang around us, probably because they felt sorry for him. At first I thought it was either early onset dementia or a stroke. As I got older and read up on those subjects, I had to dismiss them as possibilities. It was difficult to have any sort of intelligent or philosophical conversations with him, as he'd always go off on some weird tangent, often followed by verbal tirades. My parents always taught me to be polite and kind to those less fortunate than myself. So in my younger years, I would just sit there and ride the wave. As the years progressed, I found polite ways to escape his bizarre performances. The years went by and his condition improved, but it was slow and painful. Many times he would have relapses, and they were sometimes worse, partly because I'd lost my conditioning. In addition to that, for him it was like a release from a pressure valve. I knew that the best strategy was to sit and wait, be quiet and still until the steam had blown away. I found myself asking the question, was it compassion or pity that made me be so patient? And was there a difference between the two? Finally, by the time I was 60, in my opinion, he was finally right in the head. I can't help but feel that it was my influence, persistence, knowledge, wisdom, that caused him to improve as he did. He finally experienced my version of normality a few years before he died. A strange coincidence, the older I got, the more he improved. In spite of the big age difference, I felt that we could have even been friends. If only he was as smart and wise as me when I was 12 years old. Poor Dad.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, George. It's very profound there. Beautiful. Okay, our next storyteller always brings joy and music to us, and we're very privileged to have her. So please sit back and really enjoy it. Well, I'll bring the microphone up. Are you coming down, are you? Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Please welcome Kathy and Ebony.
Yes, so some of you may or may not have met Ebony. I'm not sure how many times I brought her to this storytelling. And anyway, I'm going to be playing a song and singing to the accompaniment of this song that I play probably once or twice at some storytelling. And I love this piece of music because it's a fun one to play. Just got to get all my levers right. And yeah, I've got to say I've appreciated being able to come and be part of this great group for 20 years or whatever. Well, yeah, because I think we were there on the second meeting, Mark was saying, but it was such a long while ago, I can't remember. But yeah, I've always looked forward to it. I remember when Aaron was little, we'd come along and we'd always look forward to going out and taking him in the pram. He was really little, so that we'd go into the city, into the, I think it was in the library there, somewhere in the city, wasn't it? Yeah. 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 Anyway, and I remember bringing on from one of those my tiny little harp that I first had. I don't know if you remember, I had this little tiny little pixie harp. But now this is my fourth harp. And I've been saying tonight to a few people that I managed to buy this because it's a gift from my mother. When she passed away, she left me a bit of money. and so I thought I want to buy a harp because she loved to hear it, and of course her favourite song for me to play was Danny Boy, but we're not singing that tonight. She got me to play it not once, not twice, but 3 times at her 89th birthday.
Thanks very much, Kathy. That was beautiful as usual. And what a lovely song that is, eh? In the summertime. It will soon be the summertime for us as well. Now, our next storyteller is a beautiful lady, and it's pretty obvious in looking at her that she is, and full of grace. Probably the other half of the brown pair. Now, unbelievably, they've been married for over 50. How many years have you been married for? 50-something years. They were married at 12. Yeah, so, and 10, sorry. Sorry for the insult. What an amazing couple and what an amazing person Josephine is. I'm not quite sure what to call you at the moment, but please welcome Josephine with her story, Call Me Madam.
Thanks, Peter. And I too would like to thank Peter and Trish for being the catalyst for this wonderful group that we are privileged to belong to. It is like a family, like a tribe, and it's certainly enriched both our lives. And thanks. Okay, this is where I wish I had 3 hands. It's like when you're at a cocktail party and you have a drink in one hand and you have a plate in the other, and then you're going to be my human... My human lectern. God, you're wonderful. Thank you. Many years ago, we lived in Wewak in Papua New Guinea on the north coast. My husband Al was based there, working for a private firm of surveyors. Before we married, Al spent the previous year by himself in PNG. His challenging job took him all around the country, and his life was both interesting and structured. Mine, since my arrival several months earlier, was anything but. While we moved around a lot, I had no job, no house, no kids, no support structure, no real purpose. It's the worst possible torture. Living at home until marriage did nothing to prepare me for this life. I was greatly lacking in gumption, awareness, and resourcefulness. I had no idea why Australians were up in Papua New Guinea, much less whether it was a good idea. I had no real interest in the people. All I wanted was to live in a house that we didn't have to share and have a job to go to. In other words, I was doing what many refugees and migrant people do when they come to Australia. They try to recreate the life they've left. So I cringe now to think of the opportunities lost. Despite the blinkers I'd chosen to wear during that time, in my early days, despite the life of conformity I'd chosen as my ideal, I still had some interesting times thrust upon me. In Wewak, our first home, for want of a better word, was a two-room donga next to the native tavern. To get to the loo, I had to go out the front, down the front steps and around the back. And each time I did, for some inexplicable reason, I would be cheered on my way by the drinkers. I spent much time alone as Al was camped out on jobs. For protection, I had a dog and a loaded rifle that I kept under the bed. One night, the dog woke me. I grabbed the rifle, but was so terrified I could hardly raise it. It went off, and I shot a hole in the floor. Whoever it was quickly changed their mind about joining me. I was glad when we moved out of there up to a proper house up the road. Down the yard in this place, near the beach, it also had what was called a boy house, which was a smaller version of the donga I had just left. Acting on someone's advice, I went to the Catholic mission and asked them if they knew of any young girls who'd like to come and work for me doing housework, because I'd then got a job, and also give me some companionship while Al was away. And they sent along Lucy, who was about 17, and she spoke English, and she was a very pleasant young woman, and it meant I didn't have to learn pidgin. I did learn some, but not much. Lucy asked if I might have a girlfriend, if she might have a girlfriend come and stay with her. Of course she could. All went well for several months. With no TV up there, Al and I used to read a lot. After dinner, we'd go out onto the veranda that was looking out over the ocean and flop down on the banana beds and read and smoke. We vaguely noticed that they had some jolly times down in the little house on the beach. And we also noticed that they had managed to save up and buy themselves a Noritake dinner set. I thought, interesting. We didn't think too much about this until one night, during dinner, the girls raced up, all agitated, and said, "Help! There are some men down in our house and they're pestering us and they won't go away." Al valiantly leapt to the defence of these young maidens. He strode downstairs and saw what they meant by some men. It looked like half of the Pacific Island Regiment, which was then based down the road at Moam Barracks. The feeling in the air was aggro. Al invited them to go. They declined. We went inside. I rang the police. Al grabbed the trusty rifle. We went out again and noticed that one fellow was inexplicably trying to uproot the clothesline support. So Al fired into the air and no one noticed. But they'd all melted away by the time two local policemen strolled onto the scene. "Ah, yes, good night, you two fella," they said. "Want him something here?" Which is pigeon for, "Hello, hello, what's all this then?" We reported the incident, outraged on behalf of our innocent girls. A short time later, the penny dropped. The police in town rang to invite us for a chat. There, they asked us if we knew what was happening in the little house in our backyard. "What do you mean?" we said. "We sit on that veranda every night. We don't see anything happening. Not much anyway. There's nothing happening." "Wrong," they said. "The place is a brothel." Here I must explain that next door to us was a sort of a motel known as Barclay's Mess, which housed all the European single men construction workers. The police told us that, despite our nightly vigils, some of these men were going out their front door, along the beach and in the seaward side window of the girls' house, out of sight of the readers on the veranda, the idiots on the veranda. The reason for the riot in our backyard was that the boys from the PIR, the Pacific Island Regiment, felt that the boys from Barclay's Mess had stolen a march on them. The reason for the girls' agitation was that the boys, the PIR boys, weren't inclined to pay as much as the Barclays boys. You may certainly call me madam. You could probably call me a few other uncomplimentary names too, but give me the benefit of the doubt. I was very young, very green, very inexperienced. Some people have fairies at the bottom of their garden. Who would have guessed what I had?
Excellent.
Thanks, Jen.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks, Josephine. What an entertaining story, and what a lovely, interesting life you led there. And yeah, it reminds me of another brothel story told by Nola, but that's a story for another time. It doesn't involve her. So, but speaking of Nola, maybe we're getting into a similar topic here. Nola, it's always great to have you along. So she's going to share something which maybe 50% of us have experienced here. I haven't experienced it, but Nola's going to tell us all about it. So please welcome Nola with Ladies' Night Out.
I think I first came to storytelling with my husband, my late husband. I think Don, did he come to the first? First one? I must have been taking the grandchildren to swimming and didn't get home in time. So eventually I trotted along to storytelling as audience, and I'm still here. So my story tonight, the setting for the story is Aqaba. And Aqaba is the port city at the bottom tip of Jordan on the border with Israel. We'd arrived at the beautiful Kempinski resort on the banks of the Red Sea after spending the previous night camping out in the desert in a wadi. Hassan, our English-speaking tour guide, and Hashim, our driver, were having a free day and evening. So our group consisted of family, 2 generations, and we were all in Jordan to attend my nephew's wedding at the Dead Sea. We'd all had a big day snorkeling and exploring the reefs. And the men were going to have an easy dinner and sit around the bar at the Kempinski. The ladies, my 2 sisters-in-law, my sister, Sonia, the young architect from India, a friend of the bride, and myself, we had other plans for the evening. the bride, the only Arabic-speaking member of our group, she was off attending to the wedding preparations. So our evening commenced. We gathered in the foyer of the Kopinski and made our way to the very upmarket jewellery shop that was in the foyer. Sonia selected a beautiful piece of jewellery, but she needed time to contemplate her purchase. This was an ideal opportunity because the shop would remain open till 11 p.m, so we could have the rest of the night out and decide as to whether this big purchase was actually needed. So we set off on our excursion. We got as far as the huge roundabout outside the Kopinski resort, and the traffic was heavy. No pedestrian crossings in sight, and no other way to get across the street. So we waited and we waited. There was no break in the traffic. No cars stopped to let us cross. We continued to wait there. We stood there for ages and ages. All of a sudden, from the other side of the roundabout, a very distinguished looking Arabic gentleman in his red and white Jordanian keffiyeh, he came out and he stopped the traffic and he ushered us across the road. He introduced himself as the taxi supervisor. "Where are you going this evening, ladies?" "We're going off to check the city. We're going shopping and then we're going to have dinner." "Follow me," he said. And lo and behold, we followed this stranger, the taxi supervisor. Around the city he took us, pointing out the landmarks. He showed us the mosque and other significant places of interest. It was very dark, and I thought we should take leave of our tour guide, but in single file we kept following through the streets. Eventually he took us down a street and into a laneway where we arrived at his brother's shop. The shop was full of stock with little room to move. There were hats, scarves, shawls, purses, cushion covers, jewellery, trinkets, everything that might be of interest to a tourist. We were introduced to his brother and our tour guide left. We scoured the shop, questions were asked, jewellery was resized on the spot, alterations were made to things. Nothing was too much trouble. We all made our purchases. Then the owner of the shop called his young 10-year-old son to lead us to his cousin's restaurant. We followed the young boy through the congested streets to a restaurant which seemed to be on the edge of a bazaar. We were introduced to the owner, the cousin, who seated us outdoors but under cover. We were served a sumptuous meal accompanied by the most delicious fruit drinks, and we planned the rest of our evening. There's no alcohol served in those Muslim countries, and only in the tourist resorts, and they make the most beautiful drinks without alcohol. We were then given directions so that we could find our way back to the Kopinski and to the jewellery shop before it closed. The jewellery shop was still open and the attendant was waiting for us. Just before closing time, Sonia made her purchase of a beautiful pendant which she was going to wear to the wedding at the Dead Sea in a couple of days. Of course, the purchase of this special piece required some celebration. So we found our way to a bar just off the foyer where the Russian singer was entertaining guests and she was singing in English. We sat, we raised our glasses to Sonia's purchase and we enjoyed the music. We then remembered we had to be up early for breakfast and to meet up with our tour guide and driver. That's our official tour guide and driver who had taken us all around Jordan. It was going to be a long way back to our accommodation at the Dead Sea for the wedding in a couple of days. So we found a lift to our floor and we were all scurrying along the hallways to our rooms when we were greeted by the men in our group. That's the older generation. I don't think the young ones cared if we were coming home. But they were anxiously looking out for us and they thought we'd been either lost or abducted, I don't know. The next morning after breakfast, we greeted Hassan and Hashim. Hassan, our English-speaking guide, asked us how our evening had been. The men told him about their dinner and their new friend, Raoul, who'd come from the Philippines and managed the Kapinski bar. We said that we'd taken a tour of Aqaba with the taxi supervisor. Hassan sat there smiling for some time. Then he told us there's no such a position as a taxi supervisor. So we don't, or will never know, who we followed around Aqaba. It was an interesting night out, but...
Well, thanks very much, Nola. What a beautiful experience. And yeah, we've kind of been around the world tonight. We've been to Aqaba, we've been to Wewak, we've had a bit of Japanese and a real lot of Australia. But there is one place that we haven't had. And John and Jerry, it's traditional that that new people that come to our group sing an Irish song. So, did I tell you about that? Yeah, maybe we should honour you guys by singing an Irish song. What's one, Kathy, that we could sing? When Irish eyes are smiling? Sorry? Do you know it? Okay, just a few bars then of if you ever go across the seas to Ireland. Okay. Come on, we'll sing it, eh? Yeah.
There you go. Do you know the words?
No, we'll sing if ever you go across the seas to Ireland.
Do you know the words?
Do you know the words? Do you know the words?
No. Am I going to have to sing an Irish song?
Do you know one bit?
I can remember all the words. Which side are you on? Are you from north or south?
You mean what foot do I kick with?
Well, it means which song would I offend you with?
Oh, you wouldn't offend me. No. I have lived with English for 50 odd years.
No, I don't know if I could get the right
offend me.
Let me think. I probably forget the words, but you might know this song. Oh, why did I sing too? Can you sing?
No.
Do you know the men be, I don't even know what it's called. Anyway, I better just sing it.
In my
Oh, that sounds better.
In my memory, I will always see the town that I once loved so well, where the school played ball by the gas yard wall, and we laughed through the smoke and the smell. Those were happy days in so many, many ways.
I can't remember the rest.
Do 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 do. In the town I loved so well.
Wow, Jen, thank you very much. And John and Jerry, it's lovely to see you here, and lovely to see Irish eyes smiling and English eyes smiling too. Is that right? You're from England?
Yes.
Yep.
Peter and Tricia, I'd just like to say, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, both of you, for first of all inviting us and then for giving us such a wonderful evening. We sort of feel a bit out of place amongst all this talent that you have here. I'm not a storyteller, but I grew up in London, right east Greenwich, depending on
Okay,
the
yeah.
That's where I grew up and went to school. As a young boy, I suppose I, like any other young boy, got up to a little bit of mischief at times. And I do recall on several occasions, I wasn't exactly truthful in what I said to my parents as to where I'd been or what I was doing. And my mother always had a saying to me, she said, "Don't you tell stories." And so, forever since then, I never tell stories.
Out of that. Oh, well.
Never too late to start.
Well, that was a great story.
I think Jerry and we thoroughly enjoyed our evening. The hospitality is second to none. Catering is fantastic. I'm glad we at least brought a plate of them to share. So thank you. We'd love to be in the audience again. Sure.
Love to have
You've got to tell a story. You just started, so you
I told a story.
Maybe I'll think of something.
Oh, you already.
You're such a pleasant bunch, and you've made us feel welcome.
Yay! Thank you. No, thanks, John. Pleasure to have you. And I must say, like the lady sitting next to you, not the one that you're married to, but the other one, Nola. Nola, I think you came here for probably 3 years before you shared a story. Would that be right? Yeah, but she never misses a beat now. She shares it every time. So we'll look forward to welcoming you again. Now, I'd like 3 people to come up here now. One by the name of Glenn, one by the name of Murray, and one by the name of Nigel. Leave the cameras rolling and just come up here, guys. Now, these 3 guys are really busy. They've got full-time jobs, except Murray. He's full-time moving at the moment. They're very busy people. They're also very busy filmmakers. They make lots of films. Between them, they've probably made 50 films this year, perhaps. And look, we're very grateful you've come along tonight and filmed our evening. We'll give 3 cheers, only one each though. So a cheer for Glenn, hip hip. Hooray. And for you, thank you. And for Nigel, hip hip. Hooray. And one for Murray, hip hip. Hooray. Okay, now hang on. Now we've got to get a comment from our filmmakers.
Yeah, I've been along to your group before, and I think you guys are pretty amazing. And I think, is it Tom? John? What John just said is very true. Very warm crowd and fascinating stories. So well done.
Yes, I had a thoroughly enjoyable evening. It's been hard not to laugh at some of the stories and get it on camera. Yes, so thank you. Thank you for letting us be part of your lovely storytelling group, Peter. I mean, I had no idea this actually existed. When Peter said, "Come along, let's video the night," I wasn't expecting anything like this at all. Secret night, yes. Secret Life of Peter. I knew Peter was a bit of a thespian. I called him Punny Pete, and he didn't disappoint tonight.
I can't think of as many things as you guys talk about. But yeah, Peter asked me to come along and do the work here tonight, which is what we're doing. We're here working. So it takes a lot of gear. It takes a lot of time to set it up. I think we were here an hour and a half before you started to get the lights and sound and camera angles and all that sort of stuff. So as it's worked out, I think we're going to be able to come up with a pretty good story for Pete. And only trouble is you'll probably only watch it once and then it'll just fade off into the distance. So thank you for inviting us, and I'm pleased that Nigel and Glenn were able to give us a hand. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate it. And yeah, the film, by the way, is going to be shown on Netflix in our dreams. But no, it'd certainly be available for everyone to have a look at. But we'll try and do a shortened version too, as well as the long version. And people like. Look, I forgot to give the apologies. So apologies are from people that aren't here tonight. So they apologise. And Dushan, of course, had a last-minute bit of work. Ingrid had a family occasion. She couldn't come. David and Vicky now. All right, so what happened was that Vicky was in New South Wales with her mum. Her mum passed away, and so she got isolated there. So the weird story is that, that she flew back on Monday and has to isolate for 2 weeks. And meanwhile, David's gone to Chermside to his daughter's place to isolate there so that he doesn't catch anything from Vicky or something like that. I don't know. But so they gave their apologies also. Was anyone else, Trish, that apologised? Probably no. We're very grateful that all of you have come. We're very grateful that all of you have come over the years and for all your contributions. I can't say enough about it because I love yous all, and it's been a privilege for both Trish and I thank you very, very much, and travel safely and happily until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you. Today in the shops I found a card that had a little ladybird on it. And of course you'll notice that Trish and Peter have lots of ladybirds around. And then I found ladybird stickers, and I had a little ladybird stone here that I've bought for you to put in your garden or something. So I've added that to the card as well. But I just wanted to read what I put in the card to you, Peter and Trish. I said, to dear Peter and Trish, congratulations on 20 years of storytelling. You truly are the joy givers. That's my name for Peter and Trish. They are joy givers. Thanks for the laughter, the music, the suppers, the films, the wine, the venue, the songs, the friendships, and 1,000 good yarns. And I reckon that would be from all of us. Yeah.
Now, just one more announcement. We have to leave at 10:30 in the morning, but you're free to stay up until then. So hang around if you like, and we'll see you when we see you.